I never thought the day would come when I'd hear my own son's voice asking a doctor to let me die. Yet, that's exactly what happened. I lay there in that hospital bed, unable to move, unable to speak, just a silent witness to the betrayal that cut deeper than any pain I'd ever known. It was a quiet afternoon, the kind where the beeping of machines feels louder than any scream. I could hear the doctors outside my door, murmuring in hushed tones, but it was my son's voice that sliced through the fog of my stroke like a knife. "Let her go," he said. "She wouldn't want to live like this. She's suffered enough." I wanted to scream. I wanted to reach out and grab his hand, to tell him that I wasn't ready, that I still had so much life left in me. But all I could do was lay there, my heart shattering piece by piece. I don't remember how long I drifted in and out of sleep, but what I do know is this. I woke up, I fought, and I came back stronger than he ever imagined. Before I tell you how it all unfolded, hit that like button, share where you're watching from, and subscribe so you never miss a story like this. Now, let's dive in. My name is Dorothy Williams. I'm 70 years old, a retired nurse who spent her life caring for others. I live in a quiet suburb where neighbors wave and birds greet me each morning. Compassion and resilience were always my guiding lights, until the day my own son turned them against me. I always thought my son, Aaron, was my greatest blessing. After his father passed away when Aaron was just 16, I poured every ounce of my heart into making sure he'd never feel alone. I worked double shifts at the hospital, took on private duty cases, and even babysat neighbors' kids just to keep up with the bills. Every time I looked at Aaron, I saw his father's eyes staring back at me, and I promised myself I'd give him everything he needed, no matter the cost. When he was accepted to college, I dipped into my retirement savings to cover the tuition that his scholarship didn't. I still remember the look of relief on his face when he found out he could go to his dream school without taking on a mountain of debt. "I'll pay you back someday, Mom," he said, hugging me so tight I thought I'd burst. I told him he didn't owe me a thing. That was what mothers did. Years later, when he wanted to start his own business, I co-signed the loan. "It's just paperwork," he said. "They need a co-signer. It'll never come back on you." I believed him. Why wouldn't I? He'd always been my good boy, the one who called me every Sunday, even after he moved across town. I'd always imagined growing old with him by my side, maybe helping with my grandkids, sharing family dinners, telling stories about how he'd once climbed the tallest oak tree in the yard and scared me half to death. Instead, it was just me in the house that felt too big, too quiet, especially at night. Still, Aaron never made me feel alone. He'd call, stop by, check in on me, sometimes even bring groceries. I was proud of the man he'd become. When I had a minor stroke 3 months ago, he was the first to show up at the hospital, holding my hand like he'd done when he was a boy afraid of the dark. Lying in that hospital bed, I felt grateful. Grateful that my son was there, that I wasn't one of those women left to fade away alone. I trusted him completely. When the doctor asked about next steps, I didn't think twice about letting Aaron make the decisions. After all, he'd always had my best interests at heart, or so I thought. It was supposed to be a routine morning check-in. The sun streamed through the hospital blinds, and the steady beeping of the monitor was oddly comforting. I was still a little fuzzy from the medication, but I could make out the voices in the hall, my son's deep tone and the doctor's calm, measured replies. At first, I thought they were just talking about my condition, how long I'd need to stay, what kind of therapy I'd need. But then I heard Aaron's voice drop, almost a whisper. "Doctor," he said, "I think it's best if we let her go." My breath caught in my throat. "Let me go?" The doctor hesitated. "You understand that would mean stopping all life-sustaining measures," he said. "Are you sure that's what she would want?" Aaron's voice sounded so sure. Yeah, he said. She wouldn't want to live like this, hooked up to machines, no real quality of life. I think we both know it's time. Time. I felt like the air had been punched out of my lungs. My own son, the one I'd carried for 9 months, taught to ride a bike, stayed up nights waiting for him to come home from dates. He was telling the doctor to let me die. A tear slipped down my cheek. I tried to speak, but my mouth felt heavy, like it was made of sand. The doctor's voice was muffled, but I caught enough. We'll need to confirm her wishes before we proceed. Erin's sigh. She has an advance directive, right? I think she said she didn't want to be kept alive like this. Advance directive? Yes, I'd signed one years ago, but that was for extraordinary circumstances. No hope, no brain activity. Not this. I was awake, aware, listening. My fingers twitched against the blanket. I wanted to scream, but all that came out was a strangled noise. The doctor said, "We need to be certain." Erin's voice hardened. "Look, she's 70. She's had a good life. It's time to let her go." My heart shattered. The pain wasn't just physical. It was a deep, cold betrayal. The boy I'd raised, the man I'd trusted, was trying to erase me. The doctor said he'd check my chart and consult with another physician. They moved away from the door, their voices fading. I lay there staring at the ceiling tiles, the white so bright it made my head ache. I thought about all the times I'd been there for him, signing papers for his business, watching his kids on weekends, helping with down payments. Every sacrifice I'd made felt like it had led to this moment. My own son deciding my life wasn't worth saving. I'd always believed that love was enough, that the bond between a mother and child was unbreakable. But lying there in that hospital bed, listening to him negotiate my death like it was a bill to be settled, I realized that bond had broken long before I ever heard those words. I turned my head to the window and let the tears come. Because in that moment, the woman I'd been, trusting, loving, devoted, died a little too. And a new part of me, a part I never knew existed, began to stir. The part that wouldn't let go so easily. The day they discharged me from the hospital, the sun felt too bright, like it was mocking me for still being here. My legs felt weak as I stepped into the hallway, my discharge papers clutched in one trembling hand. Erin wasn't there to pick me up. He'd sent his wife Linda with a tight smile and a quick, "Let's get you home, Dorothy." She loaded me into the back seat like I was luggage. I stared out the window as we drove, the Florida palms blurring into a green smear. When we reached my little house, the same one I'd lived in for 30 years, she didn't offer to help me inside. Just popped the trunk and said, "Take care, okay?" Then she was gone, the car pulling away in a cloud of exhaust. Inside, the house felt empty. My son's laughter used to fill these rooms. The grandkids' squeals and the smell of Sunday dinners, roast chicken, sweet potato pie, all gone. I sank onto the couch and tried to call Erin. No answer. I tried again, leaving a message. "It's Mom. Just wanted to say thank you for everything." My voice caught. I ended the call. Days passed. I called again and again. Sometimes Linda would answer and say, "He's busy," or "We'll call you back." They never did. I thought maybe I'd done something wrong. Maybe he was overwhelmed. Maybe he thought I'd been a burden. I replayed every conversation we'd ever had, every moment I'd helped him, every loan, every babysitting session. I thought about the way he used to look at me when he was small, like I was the center of his universe. Had I been too much? I started to believe his words in that hospital room. Maybe I wasn't worth the effort. Maybe he'd been right to think it was time to let me go. But every time that thought crept in, I remembered the nurse who'd sat with me that first night in the hospital. Her name was Camille. She'd held my hand when I cried. She'd said, "You're stronger than you think, Ms. Williams. Don't let anyone make you feel small." She called once just to check in. "How are you doing?" she asked. "Fine," I lied. "You're not alone," she said. You know that, right? I wanted to believe her, but it was hard. The house was quiet. The nights were long. I made dinner for one and barely touched it. I slept in fits and starts. Every ring of the phone made my heart race, hoping it was Aaron calling to apologize, to say he'd been wrong, that he loved me and wanted me in his life. But the calls never came. One afternoon, I saw my reflection in the hallway mirror. Gray hair, lines etched deep, eyes that had seen too much. I barely recognized myself. But there, in the background, I saw a photo of Aaron as a baby. I remembered holding him for the first time. How small and perfect he'd felt in my arms. The tears came again, but this time they were different. Not just grief, but anger. How could he? I turned away from the mirror. I knew then that waiting for him to call would only make the pain worse. I had to start living for me, because the woman who'd raised him deserved better than silence. She deserved kindness, even if it had to come from herself. A week after I'd returned home, I found myself standing in front of my kitchen sink, staring out the window at the empty yard. The sun was bright, but everything felt faded, like the colors had been washed out of my life. I'd spent days hoping Aaron would show up, that he'd ring the bell, tears in his eyes, and say, "I'm sorry, Mom. I was scared. I didn't mean it." But each day ended the same way, alone. One morning, I heard a knock at the door. My heart leapt. Maybe it was him. But when I opened it, it was my neighbor, Joanne, standing there with a warm smile and a casserole dish in her hands. "Dorothy," she said, "I heard you were home. I thought you might need some company." I hadn't realized how much I needed that until the tears started streaming down my face. She sat with me at the kitchen table, her presence steady and kind. I told her everything, how Aaron had told the doctor to let me go, how he hadn't called since I got home, how I'd started to believe that maybe I really wasn't worth the trouble. Joanne shook her head. "Honey, you gave that boy everything. You don't owe him one more tear." Her words hit me like a lightning bolt. For the first time since the hospital, I felt a flicker of anger. Righteous anger. I'd been a nurse for over 40 years. I'd held dying hands, comforted grieving families, worked night shifts, and saved lives. I'd raised a son by myself, sent him to college, supported his dreams. And now, he'd left me to fade away? That evening, I went online and found a local stroke survivor group. They met every Thursday at the community center. My hands trembled as I filled out the form, but I pressed submit anyway. The next day, I bought groceries, fresh vegetables, fruit, real meals. I started taking short walks in the mornings, feeling my strength return step by step. At the Thursday group meeting, I met others who'd been through the same, some with scars deeper than mine. One woman, Alice, said, "We get to decide how this story ends." Not them. Her words sank in. I began to see that I wasn't weak or worthless. I'd survived something that could have killed me. I had a second chance, and I was going to take it. Every day, I wrote a line in my journal. I am more than what he said about me, because I was, and I wouldn't let his betrayal define the rest of my life. It was a rainy Tuesday afternoon when Aaron finally knocked on my door. I'd just finished my daily walk, raincoat zipped up to my chin, hair still damp from the drizzle. I opened the door, and there he stood, hands jammed in his pockets, eyes downcast. "Mom!" he began, his voice almost too soft to hear. I stayed silent, letting the pause stretch. I wanted him to feel the weight of this moment, the silence he'd left me in for weeks. He shifted uncomfortably, clearing his throat. "I know things got bad. I made some mistakes." I raised an eyebrow. "Mistakes?" He sighed, rubbing his forehead. "I've lost my job. The business went under. We're behind on the mortgage. He finally looked at me then, eyes watery and desperate. "I need help, Mom. Just for a little while, until we get back on our feet." I felt the kitchen chair behind me and lowered myself into it, heart pounding. I stared at my son, the same boy I'd raised on peanut butter sandwiches and secondhand clothes, the same boy whose tuition I'd scraped together by working overtime, the same boy who had told a doctor to let me die rather than fight for me. "Aaron," I said, my voice calm but steady. "Do you know what you asked the doctor when I had my stroke?" His face twisted, eyes darting to the floor. "Mom, I was scared. I didn't know if you'd make it. I didn't want you to suffer." I cut him off. "You told the doctor to stop treatment. You told them to let me die." He flinched like I'd slapped him. "I know," he whispered, tears welling. "I know. I was wrong. I was so wrong. But Mom, you've always been there for me. I'm your son. Please, I need you." His words felt like old scars tearing open. Part of me wanted to wrap my arms around him and tell him everything would be okay. But another part, the part that had fought for every breath in that hospital room, knew I couldn't just forgive and forget. I leaned forward, folding my hands on the table. "Aaron, I spent my whole life putting you first. I gave you everything I had. And when I needed you most, you left me to die." He shook his head, sobbing now. "Mom, please, I'm sorry." I held up a hand. "I forgive you for the fear. I forgive you for the mistakes, but I will not let you drain me dry again." His eyes widened and his mouth opened, but no sound came out. I stood up stronger than I'd felt in months. "I wish you well. I hope you find your way, but I am done being your safety net." His face crumpled as he reached for me, but I stepped back. "I love you," I said softly, "but I love myself too." And with that, I turned and walked into the kitchen, leaving him standing there in the doorway. I didn't slam the door. I didn't scream. I just let the silence speak for me. That night, I sat in my favorite armchair with the rain tapping softly on the window. I held a cup of chamomile tea, breathing in its calming scent, and stared at the small lamp that cast a warm glow across my living room. It was the same lamp Aaron had given me for Christmas years ago, back when he still called me every Sunday and thanked me for everything I'd done. I traced the edge of the lampshade with my finger, thinking of all the ways life had changed, and how I had changed too. 3 months ago, I'd been a woman lying in a hospital bed, my body weak and my mind clouded, hearing the words I'd never thought I'd hear. Let her go. That betrayal had shattered something inside me. But now, in this quiet room, I realized it hadn't destroyed me. It had freed me. I took a slow sip of tea, letting the warmth fill me. I thought about the Dorothy who would have given in without a fight, the one who would have written a check or mortgaged her house just to save her son from his mistakes. But that Dorothy was gone now, replaced by a woman who knew her own worth. I'd learned to value myself not just as a mother, but as a person with her own life to live, someone who deserved respect, kindness, and a say in her own story. I no longer saw myself as a victim of my son's betrayal, but as a survivor of it. The loneliness I'd felt after leaving the hospital had been overwhelming at first. Friends drifted away, unsure of what to say or do. Even the neighbors I'd shared laughter with at summer barbecues seemed distant. But over time, I found new connections. Women from the community center who'd been through their own betrayals. Volunteers at the local library who loved books and warm cups of tea. Even a neighbor who stopped by every Sunday just to check in. I started gardening again, planting bright pink azaleas and daffodils in the small yard out back. I'd always loved the way flowers seemed to bloom even after the harshest winters, defiant and hopeful. Every time I looked at those blossoms, I felt a kinship with them, like I too had bloomed despite the cold. As I sipped my tea and watched the rain, I let a smile spread across my face. My life wasn't perfect. There were still nights when the memories crept in and made my heart ache. But I knew now that I could handle those moments. I knew that I was stronger than I'd ever given myself credit for. I set my cup down and leaned back in the chair, feeling the calm settle in my bones. I'd given everything I had to my son, my love, my money, my trust. And when he tried to take the last of my dignity, I chose to fight for myself instead. I wasn't his safety net anymore. I was my own. And as the rain softened to a mist, I whispered to the quiet room, "I choose me." That was the moment I knew I'd truly recovered, not just from the stroke, but from the betrayal that had threatened to break me. From now on, my life would be on my terms, my choices, my boundaries, my peace. No more apologies for putting myself first. No more questions about whether I deserved kindness. I did, and that was enough. What would you do if your own child gave up on you at the worst moment of your life? Would you forgive them? Or would you choose to walk away, reclaiming your dignity and strength? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below and share your story, because your experiences matter too. If this story touched you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories that remind us how strong we really are. Your voice matters. Let's build a community where no one feels alone in their struggles.